I don't know what it's like where you are, but here it's a cold December morning in Des Moines, which means it's a perfect time to be in the shop. Unless, of course, your shop is like mine at home, which is an unheated garage. Then you're doing exactly what you should be doing, and that's learning about how to improve your woodworking skills. Now in Woodsmith 235, a craftsman-style bed features some solid wood panels in the frame and panel, headboard, and footboard. Now those panels ended up being pretty thin, about 3/8 of an inch thick. And while gluing up solid wood panels is an essential woodworking skill, when you start working with thinner materials, anything say a 1/2 inch thick or thinner, you run into a few other challenges. So what I'd like to do today is to talk about 2 different techniques that I have that I use to make sure that I can get flat, smooth panels right off the bat. Now, one of the challenges that you're going to run into with thin stock like this is when you start applying clamping pressure, it's easy to get a little heavy-handed and buckle the panel. The result is that you can clamp in a bow in your panel or a cup. The result is that panel won't fit in the grooves that you need it to fit into. Or if you try to sand it or plane it flat, it's going to end up being too thin. So the technique that I want to show here is helpful for when I'm working with thin panels where the boards are longer. Now ordinarily when you're working with thicker stock, you'll start applying clamping pressure in the center and then working your way to the ends. But with thinner boards, I like to work from one end to the other. The reason is that thinner boards will also have a tendency to dip and dive along the length of them, resulting in joints that just aren't flush, and then you'll end up having to smooth those out later on. You can see here on this panel that I have a few of the boards just aren't flat here when they're resting on the clamps. So to help keep them in alignment, I'm going to use a set of plastic shims. Now I found these at the hardware store or a home center. What I like about these shims is that being plastic, the glue isn't going to stick to them. So once I take the panel out of the clamps, the shims will just pop right off. So I'm going to slip a shim between the boards and the clamp on both sides, or under both of the joints. And now I'm going to apply just enough clamping pressure to hold the pieces together. Now to help balance out the clamping pressure, the next clamp that I'm going to apply is going to go on the top. Here again, I'm going to slip in a couple of shims to help keep those joint faces tight and flat. And again, just snug up the clamp just enough to hold it in place. One of the nice things about working with thin stock is that the boards end up being pretty flexible. So when I get to the third clamp, you can see that just by adjusting them from the ends, the boards will flex enough that I can get a nice flush level joint. Then I'll just snug up the third clamp. By the time I get to the last clamp at the end of the joint, again it's going to go on the top, I can be pretty confident that my boards are going to be in alignment, and it only takes a little bit of finger pressure to tighten up the clamp and keep the boards nice and flush. Once I have it all snugged up and I'm confident that the joints are flat, I'll go down the line and add just a little bit more clamping pressure so that I know that the joints are closed up tight. Now later on when I come back, pull the clamps off of here, I'm going to have a flat panel that's not going to take a lot of work to get nice and smooth. You've probably heard the saying that you can never have too many clamps. Well, I'm going to tell you that for some assembly tasks, it's probably best to skip the clamps altogether. Instead, you can use the second technique that I want to talk about, and that's this assembly board. It starts off with a piece of melamine-covered particle board. Now I'm using the particle board because it's flat and stable, and it's not going to warp on me. And the melamine surface is nice and slick, so glue doesn't stick to it. Once I'm done with a project, any dried glue on there will easily scrape off with a carbide scraper. And you do have a carbide scraper in your shop, right? Once I have it nice and cleaned off, you can also see that I've drilled 3 rows of holes along here. And I'll get to those in a minute. On one edge, I've attached a cleat with some screws. To use it, you can set your pieces in place and apply glue to the edges. Next, I'm going to add a plywood pressure bar and then a set of dowels that fit into the holes that I drilled. To apply the clamping pressure, I'm going to use 3 wedges. They fit between the dowels and the pressure bar. I can press them into place, and then with a mallet, I can easily adjust the amount of clamping pressure that's applied to the panel. What I like about this setup is that it saves my clamps for other tasks, and the combination of the wedges and the pressure bar provides a wide, even amount of clamping pressure across the whole panel. Now, sometimes when I'm working with really thin materials, even this amount of clamping pressure can cause the pieces to bow and flex up from the surface. The solution to that is pretty simple, though. You just need a little bit of weight. So I've taken one of my hand planes, put some masking tape on the bottom to protect it from glue, and then you can just set it in place. The nice part about this assembly board, too, is that once I have everything set up, it's stable, and I can move it off the workbench to clear up some space to continue working on other parts of the project. So the next time you're working with thin materials, need to glue them together into wider panels, you can use one or the other of these techniques, and you'll end up with smoother, flatter panels and better looking projects.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that video tip, be sure to subscribe to the Woodsmith Shop channel. Now, every week we're adding great woodworking tips and woodworking videos. All you have to do is hit the bell to be notified. Plus, you'll find project plans and downloads in the description below.